The Department of Minerals and Energy has revealed that Lily Mine did not follow the country's laws before the collapse in February of 2016. The mine trapped 3 workers underground: Pritin Kambule, Solomon Nyirenda and Yvonne Mnisi. Speaking to Newzroom Afrika, the department's Director General, Advocate Thabo Mokoena, says it's evident that the CEO and management were responsible for the incident. Well, let's discuss this now, and we are joined in this conversation by the lawyer for the mine, which is Richard Spoor. We're also joined by Amcu President Joseph Mathunjwa. We're also joined by CEO of Aquamansi, that's Neil Herrick. They are all part of this conversation. Harry Mazibuko, we understand, is also with us. He talks on behalf of the families. Gentlemen, to all of you, thank you very much for making the time to talk to us. Before we kick off this conversation, I just want to give you a bite of what the Director General told this channel on Sunday about the events which led to the collapse of this mine, or should I say the sinking of the container that had these workers inside it back in 2016. Let's just have a listen to Advocate Mokoena.
There were signals before this incident, and the management was fast asleep. They did not do anything. Maybe they were trying to prioritize the profit. And so it's a very bad thing that, I mean, you know, they should have taken the necessary steps immediately.
All right. I hope you were able to hear those comments from the Director General, who basically says that there were signals before this incident and, more importantly, management was fast asleep. Mr. Spoor, let me start with you. Explain your position in this context. I'm told here that you are the lawyer for the mine. Do you possibly represent the CEO of Vantage, which is the company that was in charge at the time of this incident?
Well, I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. I represent the families of the deceased, and I represent the union Amcu. Mr. Mathunjwa is my client.
All right.
So I'm not really in a position to speak for the mine.
All right. No, that's perfectly fine. I think I needed to have that cleared up before we begin the conversation. Now that you've heard the sentiments from the Director General, as a union or as a lawyer that represents these families, are you able to tell me just how deep in trouble these mine executives could be if indeed the Director General's words are to be believed?
Well, first of all, I'm in total agreement with Advocate Mokoena about his assessment, and that's based on the evidence we've heard during the investigation into this accident and now subsequently at the inquest into the deaths of the miners. There is no doubt whatsoever that this crown pillar was not properly designed. The company should have been was aware of the imperfections in that design, was aware of the risk of this failing, and notwithstanding that, they put surface infrastructure on top of the mine, well knowing that it could collapse. What we're hoping for is a finding in the inquest that the mine is criminally liable for the deaths of these workers and the collapse that happened, and we hope that there'll be a prosecution and a substantial fine.
Yeah.
Whether or not individual directors might be held liable, I don't know. But certainly we believe that the mine should be charged and prosecuted with culpable homicide and numerous violations of the Occupational Health and Safety Act, as well as the NPRDA, which was also violated by them when it came to the design and the placing of surface infrastructure on top of the old pit.
Yeah. Mr. Mathunjwa, let's bring you in. You have heard the Director General saying that signals were there before this accident happened. As a union that has been at the forefront of this matter, are you aware at all that the mine management may have been alerted to this?
Thank you, and good morning to your viewers, and good morning to the members of the panel. I should think that the workers themselves, they should have been aware or maybe reporting to the structures, but I cannot put my head on the block. But coming strongly from what the DG is saying, I think where we are seated as a union, they cannot 100% throw the blame to the mine. The question will be what they were doing themselves. What is their scope of work? What are they entitled to do? Why are we paying them through our pay as we earn? Why are they employed in that department?
In other words, you're asking...
Surely they must have the inspectorate.
In other words, yeah, exactly.
When did they last...
You're asking about mine inspectors. Sorry to interrupt you.
Yes, I mean the inspectorate, the mine inspectors, when did they last visited that mine? And putting again the container right on top of the mine that has been an open cast filled with soil or whatever, at the end of the day, if there was a proper inspectorate, they should have discovered, they could have notified the mine that they must remove that container on top of that heap of soil, because underneath it was mined. So therefore, somehow there was a negligence from the DMRE itself.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm not taking away the negligence of the mine and the finding that they should face the wrath of the law, but even the department itself, you could see even today, 6 years down the line, the container is still underground. The department, what is it doing about it? I've made several calls from the former state president, Honorable Zuma, and even to the sitting president. I've written letters to them, to the current sitting minister, to declare Lily Mine as a disaster in order for the government to get resources to get that container. But all it went to the deaf ears.
All right. I'll tell you, Mr. Mathunjwa, in a moment. It'll become clear to you as to what the department is doing as far as trying to retrieve the remains of these trapped workers. Let me come to Mr. Neil Herrick. You are the CEO of Aquamansi. Now, this is a company that is looking or hoping to buy over Lily Mine. Before you comment, sir, I just have another soundbite from the Director General as to the process of buying up this mine, where he says that it looks like the owners of this mine currently are trying to block the process of the buying up of this mine. Let's just have a listen to Advocate Mokoena once again.
For us, I mean, we don't see any reason why Vantage should be involved in a protracted legal battle for whoever company that wants to acquire the mine. Because we called the CEO. He came to the office. We sat down with him and we posed a specific question to say to him that, CEO, can you tell us what is your interest in this mine? Why are you inhibiting the acquisition of this mine? We've got no interest as to who takes the mine, but what is your problem? He then said, no, we want a credible company to take over this mine. Now, said, no, but you can't tell us about a credible company that you want to take this mine because yourself, you have failed.
Mr. Herrick, when you hear those comments from the Director General of the department, what comes to mind? There is your confirmation that you trying to buy up this mine, that process is being blocked.
Yes. Good morning, colleague, and good morning to your viewers and to my colleagues on the panel here today as well. I did see the interview on Sunday, and what came into mind is that Mr. McChesney has been blocking this process for almost 6 years. Arqomanzi is not the first bidder to come into this process, but we're the first bidder to come in and to stay in the process. And Mr. McChesney was able to shake off quite a lot of previous bidders, but he's been unable to shake us out of this process, and we're not going anywhere. We're a credible company. Mr. McChesney has tried to belittle my experience and that of my colleagues for his own purposes, his own selfish purposes.
What do you think those intentions are to try and block your company from taking over the mine? What are his interests here?
That's absolutely his sole intention, is to stop us from taking control of the mine. I think a very important point that needs to be made here is that the shareholders were responsible for the running of the mines in terms of the Companies Act until such time as those very same shareholders and the directors decided to put the companies into business rescue. Business rescue is a process that is driven by creditors of the companies and not by the shareholders. Mr. McChesney gave up the right to decide the future of these mines when he put the companies into business rescue. Unfortunately, the situation here is that the business rescue practitioners act on the instructions of Mr. McChesney instead of on the instructions of the creditors. We cannot explain the reasons for that, but that is the reality. The truth behind this is that Arqomanzi has obtained 3 court orders over the last 2.5 years in which the business rescue practitioners have been instructed by the High Court to publish amendments to the previously adopted plans and to let the creditors decide the future of the mines, but they refuse to do so.
All right. All right. Sorry to interrupt you there. In the interest of time, let's also get into the conversation. Harry Mazibuko, who represents the families, to weigh in. Harry, you've got the confirmation now from the Director General of Minerals and Energy that efforts to buy this mine are being blocked by the current owners. What are you going to do as families?
Yes, good day, and the viewers as well. You see, our position maybe is slightly different than the ones of the companies and everybody else. We, the families and the affected employees, we've got less to do with business and the technical point of view. Our concern and our priority number 1 is for the people who clocked in on the 5th of February 2016. So the question do we have, considering all the processes that are mentioned by the expert, you see, including what the DG has currently said, it is true, as law-abiding citizens, but we're still stuck with the question as to when, because it's the question, it is clear to every South African in the world at all that it's not money, it's not about the expertise to find the people who are missing. It's about something else which I don't know. All we're begging, the question that we're sitting it with now is that who's got authority over the business rescue practitioners? Because clearly, it's not us saying so, but the Court of Law of the Republic has stated that the business rescue practitioners are acting unlawful. So the question to us, till when, who's got power over the business rescue practitioners? That is why, on the other hand, we tend to blame our government in general, not the department, because something like this happened in Chile. The Chilean government, the entire cabinet, they sit down and strategize. How can we find our people? I believe that it's where we need to start. We need to find the people, irrespective who is owning what. These are people, they are not animals, you see. That is our position, that let our government intervene. Let every stakeholder sit on a round table. The solution is there. It's just that some parties are not willing.
Richard Spoor, very briefly, as I take final remarks from you. On Sunday, I asked the Director General, Mr. Mokoena, as to whether he can give a timeline when the container that has the remains of these workers can be retrieved. And he said clearly that he cannot give a commitment that they cannot honor. What is left for them is to support efforts to buy the mine in order for the new owner to retrieve these remains. Do you think that is going to be possible?
Well, I think he's absolutely correct. I mean, the whole recovery process and the resumption of mining, which is really important to the local community and, of course, the union and its members who work on those mines, that whole process is being held hostage by the business rescue process. In my mind, the process is being abused by the former shareholder to gain some personal advantage. It's worth noting here that there is a very valuable resource there with a lot of potential for the region and for, I suppose, the companies and the shareholders of the companies that own that. And what we need to see is this business rescue process wound up. We need to see a new owner in place who's committed to make the recovery the family's bodies and willing to reopen this mine, create jobs and employment, and make a contribution to the social upliftment of a deeply impoverished and traumatized community.
Mr. Mathunjwa, very briefly from your side, as a union that has been fighting for the retrieval of the remains, what is it that you can do from your side to put pressure so that this mine finally gets to someone else's hands who can help with the retrieval of the remains?
I think as a trade union, as we are legally cited in the papers, whom we are representing the workers which are still members of Amcu in terms of the law, we've been very much vocal about this. We've marched to DMRE, we've written to the state president requesting assistance, but we think surely that the government has got power. They can overrule the very same business practitioner, they can overrule any business because other regulators, these minerals does not belong to either the business or the rescue practitioner. It belongs to the people of South Africa. The only thing that I can see clearly now, the business itself, politicians, they've hijacked the whole process now. It's becoming a fighting turf for their own narrow interest in the expense of their lives to close the chapter of the families. There is no business in this world that will fight for the interest and the dignity, in particular in South Africa, for black people. It won't happen. We have to reclaim our dignity. Our government should put a stop to this and go and retain that container. And then after they've retained the container, closure to give a closure to the family, to the pains that is being caused by the corporate business, and thereafter let them continue with their fight, not in the expense of the lives and the pains of the families. The government has got a full authority, but because this country is run through neoliberal economic policies where the corporate power is at play, which has got more power than the state itself, that's the reason we are seeing what we are seeing today. The business has got much power in this government rather than the people whom voted them and put into power. We shouldn't be struggling like this just to get a container.
Mr. Mathunjwa,
by that time it was costing only 200 million to retrieve. Why this business and rescue people, Aquamansi, why they don't put the money, say, we've got 200 million now, let's enter into an agreement, let's retrieve the container. The issue of money will start out. No, people, their interest is money and profit. It's not about the pain that is felt by these families.
Well, the CEO of Aquamansi is here, Mr. Mathunjwa. In fact, he gets to have the final word. Mr. Herrick, the DG's words are, and I quote, "Whoever is the successful bidder should have an opportunity of retrieving that container," close quote. Can you guarantee that if indeed you are the successful bidder, you will bring to surface these remains?
Colleague, we've made the commitment in terms of our engagements with Nkosi Dlamini, the leader of the Lomshio Traditional Authority, as a part of the discussions we had with him last year. We've raised money from our anchor investor in Hong Kong to the tune of over 400 million rand, and we have an understanding with the Industrial Development Corporation for a further amount of 230 million rand that we require in year 2 after the completion of the business rescue. So in total, Arqomanzi has got an amount of funding behind it of close to 650 million rand. Our plans include an absolute commitment that the first thing we will do once we secure control of the assets is prepare and start the sinking of the rescue decline, which will go down to 5 level and commence with the operations to locate and recover the container and Priti Nkambule, Yvonne Nisi and Solomon Urenda. That is our first and most important commitment in this process. We've made it to the chief. We've given that commitment to the DMRE. We're ready to go. What we need now is for Vantage to stop with its futile appeals to the Supreme Court of Appeal. Let the creditors decide the future of the mines and let us get on with the process of rescuing the people and recreating 2 new mines that have the interest of all of their stakeholders at heart and not just the interest of a selfish few shareholders led by Mr. McChesney.
Mr. Herrick, that's a mouthful indeed. Harry Mazibuko, you have been listening to Neil Herrick there, who is giving a commitment that if he is the successful bidder, if he is to own this mine, the first job is to bring to surface the remains of all of these families, the victims, the remains of the victims. Do you trust that Aquamansi is indeed the company that is going to successfully bring these remains to ground?
102% with reason, with supporting valid, valuable reasons. Why? Because Arqomanzi is the only bidder or whatsoever that is in contact with us as the families. They came to the families before the chief, Mr. T.S. Lamin, who's the owner of the land, presented to us the proof of funding, presented to us the plan as to how and how long it's going to take to get the container. Just the problem that they are telling us, let's go, let's do it, is that is this thing of the business rescue practitioners, the law. So we, not only me, we together with the families and the chief, who's the owner of the land, who are satisfied with giving them their blessing, because they are the one who are transparent. Unlike the others, we hear them on media saying things, but they are not in touch with the families. But when presenting to South Africa and the world, as if they care, which is not true to us, is not relevant. We find it very difficult to understand. Arqomanzi, we are behind, we rally behind, there's nothing wrong. Unlike our employer, who is totally not in contact with us, they don't care. Instead, they are doing things that are not appropriate to us, but for that, it's for the law to play its course. But since the collapse of the mine, if I may ask, what is it that our employer has done to us to assist us as the former employees and the families as well? You'll find that the answer is nothing. So for people saying things on our behalf without us, we find it very difficult to understand what kind of a leaders are they, because they need to explain to us in terms of program. We cannot say we are fighting for Pretty Yvonne and Solomon and not engaging with them. It's very, very unfair. You see, we are lying to ourselves, we are lying to South Africa and the world. All we need is for our colleagues to be fine.
Harry Mazibuko, thank you very much for your inputs here. That brings us to the end of this discussion, and I must just indicate that we did invite the CEO of Vantage, and unfortunately he could not join us.